on down at the state levels. Thanks.
Well, it's good to get a chance to visit with folks, and I get to do this a lot this time of year, but usually it doesn't have to be a campaign season, so anytime you guys are short, let me know, and I'll come over and visit, or I'll send somebody that's better. But Mark and I did do a little block walking the other day. It's good to see him out. I didn't recognize him without a golf club in his hand. His golf club was better than mine, so I lose more balls than I actually get to keep, so that's my golf game. But Steve's heard me talk probably 2 times now. He could probably do most of this, but we're on the same district. We're in the same district. I thought I'd give you a little brief rundown of what we did last session, what I'm kind of looking at in the next session, working through the interim. You get all your work done during the interim. If you wait till January of 15, which is when we're scheduled to go back, if you haven't got your agenda or your items lined up, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to be very successful. But and then kind of see where the challenges that the state is going to face. We've got a good state, but we still have to address a few things. But last session, we had a great session, and compared to the first session, it's $27 billion estimated shortfall. Last session was $8 billion surplus. So you can see I had the tale of 2 cities, so to speak. I got to experience both extremes. First time ever in state history to have a deficit, first time like that, and first time in state history to have a surplus such as that. So each of them had their challenges, and I would say that the one with the surplus had just as many, just different types of challenges. In the first session, you say no a lot with the deficit. Everybody understood that. In the second session, you got to say, we can give you this much, and they're talking about why you have this much and why they couldn't have more of it. So it was a little bit more contentious, I guess, is a good word for it, on how you distribute the money. But I think history will look back and look at the 83rd session and say we did a good job with the money. We did fund, or begin the process of funding a water plant. Voters approved that in November, 85%. It's a plan that had been out at the state since 1999, broken up into 16 regions across the state. And it was their way of saying, this is our water plan that we need to go forward. Up until last session, there would have never been a dollar allocated to it. So hopefully, we've started the process. Did we fund water 100%? Absolutely not. Did we fix water? Absolutely not. But we at least began that debate and that discussion and put some money where our mouth was. And hopefully we'll evolve into what the water plan is supposed to look like. We probably, my I think, most proudest piece of legislation was HB 5, which was our education reforms. We undid, I think, probably 30 years of well-intended, no child left behind driven, kind of a federal program driven curriculum that said if you're not going to college, then you're really not somebody we have a process for. You're not included, if you will. There was 70% of our high school kids in public education were not going to higher ed. As of last session, we have now opened up that door called endorsements, but think of it as curriculum that's focused on specific areas that kids prior to HB 5 didn't have options. Liberal arts, especially trades, welding, those kind of VOTEC, it's career tech. VOCA is what they used to call it when I was in high school. So we open up the pathway to say if you're not academically higher ed bound, or if that's not your passion, or if that's not your aptitude, you're going to be treated no differently. You're going to be treated with a degree program, and you're going to be trained in a job when you get out that you can probably start at 45 to 60 grand in this economy today. Employers screaming, and not suffer a degree program that says you didn't finish high school with the higher deal. We took the labels off is what we did. So I'm excited about HB 5. We've got some challenges there. We did open it up where you could do career tech and work with community colleges, and I think in the interim we're going to have to work through how do we bring in private sector into the HB 5 realm. So what I'm getting to there, if Slaton ISD wants to offer a welder's program, they may not have the resources to build a welding program, but there's somebody in the community that may have that laboratory or have that training or have that expertise that we can go to. We started down the road, but we didn't quite get there. Employer liabilities are issues that we've got to work through so that the employer's not held liable if something bad happened to the kiddo. But we've got to kind of begin to massage and figure out what that is, because we don't have a public education that's full of those type of instructors. They're all out in the private sector. So we got to figure out how to make that work. So HB 5 needs a little work, but I will tell you, 5 years from now, we're going to look back and you're going to have a dropout rate that's coming down because for the first time in a long time, kids find education relevant. They can see a goal, they can see an end, they can see financial ends that justify them staying in the public school. So I'm real excited about that. Also, HB5, we took 15 tests down to 5. We heard teachers and administrators, and it just didn't make sense. We were testing the kids just every single day, and it really wasn't getting us to where we wanted to. Again, well-intended, but I think we just missed the mark. I tell everybody, No Child Left Behind, which is not a state program, and we're still subject to it because it is federal, actually ended up leaving a lot of kids behind. But I think we kind of fixed some of that. On the social side, if you will, the social programming that we went through, unemployment beneficiaries now have to pass the drug test before they can collect unemployment. That only makes sense. If your employer requires you to pass a drug test and you're on unemployment benefits and you're on drugs, you're never going to get a job. So kind of a vicious cycle. So in Texas, you have to pass that drug test now. Pro-life, people that don't know me or do know me, that is my non-negotiable. I am a pro-life advocate. I am an activist. I will defend life to the very end. Most people, when you talk about pro-life, think of the unborn. We have truly got a battle going on in this country. In the state of Texas, unfortunately, it's probably one of the weaker legislators or legislation or statutes that are out there. For the other end, when you're end-of-life decisions, it's not a very pro-life, if you will, statute. So we're going to be working on that. That will be the pro-life legislation in the next session is what do we do with our vulnerable, our older, our elderly, our sick, our physically and mentally challenged. There is a big push to take the route away from when that life ends. And I'm a natural. From conception to natural death, that's pretty much where I'm at and will stay. So that'll be a pro-life piece of legislation that you'll hear a lot about in the next session. We funded $100 million into women's health programs. As this governor's race heats up, you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric, a lot of things about how bad we were and what we did to women's health. Prior to that funding, it was $40 million a year. It was about a 9 to 1 ratio for federal and state match. State doubled that. It's over $100 million into the health program for women, which actually opened up more access in my rules and more doctors and more providers and more care. I mean, it's out there. You can go find it and see it. So I say all that to say it was a good session. You know, we had some surplus. I think that we spent the money wisely. Things that we didn't get done. We didn't finish transportation. We got a transportation bill that you're going to vote for in November of 2014. That's going to begin that process similar to water. It's kind of carving out a couple of $1 billion. I'll say that. It's going to be about $1.5 billion, but it's really the rainy day or the savings account you hear a lot about. That comes from severance taxes from the oil and gas industry. It's all it feeds it. Currently what's happening there is 25% of that shaves off and goes to education before anything's ever going in the rainy day. So 75% of our severance tax revenue is stuck out there coming into the rainy day account. In 14 of November, you'll vote to take half of that, effectively 37.5% of the total will then be diverted to a transportation fund that will set up a way to leverage state and local dollars for transportation projects. So that's what's coming up in November of 2014. We've got money that is currently being spent in different areas of the budget that was transportation money. It was designed to be transportation money. It made sense that it be transportation money, and we spit that off into the GR and spend it on other things. So my thought about transportation and what I'll be working and focusing on is ending those diversions so that there's a transparency in the budget where transportation dollars stand whole and you got your general fund. As we do that, the general fund will need more money, and we're going to have to replace that and come up with where we get that money from within the framework of the budget. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know there's always questions. I personally have taken a very much of an interest in Health and Human Services. I'll give you an example of why that's important to the state of Texas. We have a $200 billion budget. 200B, that's $1 billion budget. 14th economy in the world. Of the $200 billion, all funds, that's federal and state and dedicated fees, all funds, $74 billion of it goes to Health and Human Services. $74 billion of that goes to education, higher and public ed. So 2 items of our entire all funds budget are consumed, and problem is Health and Human Services budget is exponentially exceeding the growth curve over our other items. Our caseloads, our indigent care, our indigent health care, our health care delivery, our nursing homes, all of those things are exceeding the growth pattern. And if we don't figure out how to deliver that and do that differently, education, public safety, corrections, transportation, water, all those things just begin to get squeezed out. So is there ways to fix Health and Human Services? Absolutely. It is a very inefficient system. There's 55,000 employees there. It is technology deficient. The challenge with Health and Human Services is every one of those programs is tied to a federal mandate. So you don't get the option of taking a change to do it better at the state level unless the federal government blesses it. And we're in a window because of Obamacare where the state can truly go and ask for some of those waivers. And if we're smart as a state, we'll get ahead of the curve and ask for the waivers that make it make sense. So I'm working in those areas. I think that's the area. I think that's the thing in the budget, that if we don't get right or begin the process of bending the curve around, that 20 years from now our state will be a pretty much 100% Health and Human Services driven budget. And that would not be good for anybody. So, take a few questions and I'll close up.